often ponder over the practices used in the divisions of law enforcement? You've got elected city, county, state, federal, and world leaders yet to be united. Since the beginning of recorded history, nations have experienced many tragedies involving altercations with law enforcement. These issues have been a subject of conversation for decades, just as we find today persons in higher authority being hesitant or unresponsive to these matters. As we look back in history and transition into today's contemporary times, we will see how to unite the Blue Divide. What can young people do to improve the relationship between law enforcement and their communities? We often find ourselves asking, why even have a law enforcement? Are they happy to preserve in these communities without complaining? Have they fulfilled the promise to protect, defend, and serve everyone regardless of their race, religion, color, creed, opinion, or ideal? What examples have they set for current and future generations? Altercations between law enforcement and their communities have passed down through the decades from our ancestors to this current day. The Civil Rights Act of 1875, otherwise known as the Enforcement Act, allowed African Americans equal treatment in public accommodations and public transportation. However, these legal inequalities would continue to prevail until Miss Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus in 1955, paving the way, uniting the Blue Divide. Violence against African Americans in public schools, churches, and being denied the right to vote led to the Civil Rights Act of 1957. The first civil rights piece of legislation passed by the United States Congress since the 1875 bill, uniting the Blue Divide. From the injustice and exposure of police brutality, which led to Rodney King's famous 1992 quote, "Can't we all just get along?" to the gun violence and bloodshed resulting in former Dallas Police Chief David Brown's tribute to his fallen officers in 2016, quoting lyrics from his Stevie Wonder song, "I'll be loving you always." Let brotherly love continue to unite the Blue Divide. Dreamers who are ordered to deport back to a country in which they have never known, and to be escorted by a law enforcement officer, resulting in a nightmare rather than a dream. But the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., leader of the Civil Rights Movement, he had a dream that one day this nation would rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. He held those truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal. He paved the way to unite the Blue Divide. So we are the next generation. Our ancestors have paved the way, and now there's a proposition at the table that we must execute. But how do we get there? I'm so glad you asked. We begin by doing our part at the table. Change violent protests into peaceful demonstrations. Use your great minds and intelligence to strengthen the relationship between law enforcement and their communities. From legal-edge society to cutting-edge technology, you too can change the world. Former President Barack Obama left a legacy of quotes for us to use at the table as a guide. He said that change will not come if we wait on some other person or some other time. And that we are the ones that we've been waiting for, and as a nation, we are the change that we seek. So, law enforcement, come forth and meet us at the table. Meet everyone at the table. The only unfilled seat in the word unity is you. Bring your confidence in law enforcement. Be accountable. Be happy. Serving these diverse communities without complaining. Be that example for future generations. Now is the time to acknowledge and agree. No matter how many weapons are violently used in our communities, the blood that is shed is still the color red. From the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last.